So welcome everyone to the English academic writing boot camp that we have organized for the first time at SNU. So I'm very happy to see many of you. And also I'm particularly grateful to have Petar here with us from all the way Europe to South Korea. So thank you so much for coming. Yeah, so before starting this session, we had a coffee and lunch together, and then we kind of calculated, and we just tried to remember when was the first time we met. And actually, we met one of the conferences. Both of us are regular attendees in 2016. So I was 14 when I was doing. Yeah, 2014. The conference happened in Edinburgh in UK. I was a PhD student doing my PhD at University of Toronto. And then you were finishing up your PhD as well, right?
Well,
2000.
Finished PhD then.
Yeah, and you're working. Yeah, a few years ahead of me. Yeah, so we met there in 2014. It's been 11 years that we've been seeing each other every other year because conference is biannual conference that both of us are attending, except for the year that when we had a COVID. So it's been regular kind of meet up, and then he's such a fun guy to hang out anyway. So we tend to drink a bit and talk about all the things, but. Beyond all of that he has been my, the most productive editor, writer, and the thinker that I have ever met. So definitely you're my one top. That's why I really wanted to have you here, not necessarily because of the students who are learning from you, but also myself. I wanted to get all the tips that you have, how productive you can be like that. It's not like human. He's like editing the books, 6 books a year, right? That's what you do. Yeah, and then his journal, which he's going to be introducing soon. It has been only 5 years since it was launched. And then within 5 years, it's indexed in Scopus and then impact factor, as you can check. It's crazy. So yeah, I had this little fund from the Institute of Education Research and then Department of Education as well. So I was kind of having him here for us to learn all about how he managed to do all the things and what his attitude towards the job. And then also there are a lot of critical issues that we want to pay attention to when it comes to publication and all the games, academic games we're all part of. But whether we agree or not, I think there are some critical discussions that we have to be aware of. So he's the best person to go for all that matter. So I'm very happy to have him, but this is my little bit of personal introduction. And if I do a little bit of formal one, as like Petar Jandrić is professor and vice dean for quality development and new study programs at Zagreb University of Applied Sciences, Croatia. Which one?
Whatever.
Yeah, and then visiting professor at Bath Spa University in UK. And you can see his previous affiliation, and he studied in Edinburgh, but before that, he was trained to be a physicist. So he was doing his undergrad and master in physics, and then after that, he decided to, get rid of physics on his CV, and he moved to education, and he's been a critical thinker, and he's engaging with critical theory in particular in his area of academic expertise. And we can learn all about what he has done, but he developed this new idea or entire new community or theory, if you like, called the Postdigital Science and Education. And as I mentioned, within 5 years, it's like all the critical scholar interested in education and technology or a integration of those this is the journal that we all kind of dying to publish. So now we have him here. And he's the editor-in-chief of this journal, as you can see, the Postdigital Science and Education journal, and then which also has the accompanying book series called with the same name as all the Scopus right now. And I don't know how far I can go with kind of phrasing him, but I kind of print this out. So when you kind of register, you got this 2-page little bit of book. So this is the editor's preface that Peter has written, and he has like little paragraphs like that we can have little quick snips into his personal and professional early days of professional life. And this is the anecdote that I really liked when I read it years ago. And so I kind of remembered this that I want to share with you. So if you want to know him a bit more in terms of how he was, his first experience of trying to publish his article with the journal, and you can have a look. So try to read this, and then I think his voice will come to you much more personally after reading this. That's what I want to share. That's the reason why I decided to share this. So without further ado, I think I talk too much, but I can keep going, but I think that's not why you're here. So I will probably give the floor to Peter. So let's just give him a big round of applause to welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction, Professor Lee. I would also like to thank everybody like Sunny and many other people who helped me to come over here, who prepared my trip, who bought my tickets and everything. To the university, of course, and to the funders who gave the money for all that. And first and foremost to you, my dear students, who actually came here, because I think it's hugely important. Academic writing these days has always been a hugely important skill. And this academic boot camp that Professor has kindly organized for you is something which is hugely important for your professional, and I would argue even personal development, which I will talk about later. So I think it's really great that we are here all together. Again, thanks Kyung Mei and everybody else who invited me here and who came to this talk. And I will just now briefly start with what's going to happen in the next couple of days. So today I will speak mostly about theory. I will introduce the concept of the post-digital, some ideas that we base the concept of the post-digital on, and I will also try to give a bit of a personal flavor to this whole thing. This is why I'm really grateful for sharing this preface, which I almost forgot that I wrote many years ago. And so today we are going to talk primarily about theory. Tomorrow we will continue with the publishing workshop, academic writing and publishing, where we will talk more about things such as your own careers, such as strategizing ways of where to publish, how to publish, what to write, how to write, and so on. And of course, I will be giving some advice and ideas about the publication, not only in Postdigital Science and Education journal, but also in other journals of similar standing and of similar ideas in this education publishing landscape. So that's roughly the concept. You can interrupt me at any times. I know it's perhaps culturally strange for students in Croatia. They will never interrupt a professor. They will just be quiet like this, and then they will later maybe ask. But if you go to the UK, for instance, then they will interrupt. So relax. I hope that I am a relaxed person. At least I'm trying to be. And do interrupt me and ask any questions at any time if you feel like. Or if it doesn't feel appropriate, I will sit here just a bit longer after we finish. So you can always approach me today or tomorrow, and we can always talk in private for 5 minutes somewhere if you feel like, and so on. I'm here at your disposal. I'm here for you, and people may have different experiences, people may have different ideas, people may have different questions, and I would like to be of service to you all. So if you have something that others may be interested in, then of course it's best to speak all together. But of course, if there's something that you would like to share with me in private, no worries, I'm here for you. It's interesting that how different people pick up different aspects from our careers, from our lives, from our whatever. So I was really actually surprised. It's been a long time since somebody reminded me that I actually used to be a student of physics. And today it's a kind of leitmotif in here, but it also in this text that you've been given. I think that it's kind of, so yeah, and I think that this story actually is a bigger story because it kind of illustrates bigger movements and bigger trends that happen. So indeed, when I was 18 years old, I really wanted to learn about the secrets of the world, and I went to study physics because it seemed like, the most fundamental natural science that actually you can learn in order to understand the world around you. And then I graduated physics, and then I went on, and then I started actually working in physics. And at the same time, at some point, I found myself 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours per day, sitting by my computer and programming in C++. And I was like, what? No, I wanted to learn about the nature, I wanted to learn about the world, and I find myself coding. And actually this happens in many fields, right? It's not just about, thankfully it doesn't happen in education, because in education there are actually alive people that you can see, that you can touch. Okay, maybe it's not very polite, but theoretically you can touch them. You can spend some time in the same room when you can breathe the same air together. But in many fields, from physics, meteorology, history, and so on, these days, and especially with big data and with algorithms, a lot of work comes down to sitting by the computer and programming. Now, I kind of learned how to program, but I was not really good at it, and I didn't feel like that my life was all about programming. So I went to move on, and I quit physics, and I joined education because I felt the need for this human touch, for this human thing, for the idea that it's not just about the computer, but it's also about the computer and about the people at the same time. Like right now in this room, like your professor and I, we've known each other for more than 10 years. We've been in touch many times. Physically, not so much, once every 2 years. But in terms of being in touch, it's much more. So it's sometimes physical, sometimes virtual. It's always a combination of computer-mediated communication, interaction. So today we had a beautiful cup of coffee, which was wonderful. Now we will spend a few days together, and then we will perhaps spend a few more years without seeing each other in person again. I mean, that's life. So, yeah, okay, and I think that indicates a larger principle that we are now facing in our lives, that we are now facing in the world. And that's the fact that computers have penetrated all aspects of our lives. And of course, I'm not the only one who noticed this. One of the first people who noticed this was Nicolas Negroponte. He has Greek origins, but he's American. Like, nobody's really American. Everybody has origins somewhere else, including many people from Korea. And this guy was working in MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology Media Lab. And back in 1998, he wrote this text, which is called Beyond Digital. And he starts the text with a reference to now quite old film, which is called The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman. I don't think that somebody is reacting, so somebody has seen the film. For those of you who haven't seen the film, probably a cultural reference would be the song Mrs. Robinson. It's a quite popular song that kind of went beyond the popularity of the film. And there, in 1967, there is this older guy giving advice to a younger colleague. And he says the future is in plastic. He says, what do you mean? Well, the future is in plastic. I mean, people have been using ceramic plates, people have been using metal pots for cooking and so on. And the plastic was new. So, he says the future is in plastic. Of course, today, everything is plastic. This cup is plastic, this is plastic. Pretty much everything is plastic one way or another. We are all imbued with plastics. As far as I understand, we all have microplastics in our organisms as well, so now we cannot avoid it anyway. You know that joke when somebody says, would you like, there's a lady buying fish at the fish market, and she asks, can you give me the plastic bag with the fish? And the shop seller says, it's already inside. You know, meaning that the fish has eaten microplastics, you eat the fish so you get the microplastics in you, so we are all full with plastics, whether we like it or not. So plastics was used in 1967, now it's all around us, now it's ubiquitous. We don't even notice it anymore, we just use it and trash it. Now the same thing, argues Negroponte, will happen with digital technology. And this is indeed what has happened with digital technology. What has happened is that we don't notice it anymore. When you come to the shop, and there's this cafe there, which I had at least 3 coffees today, it's just cashless payments. You cannot pay with cash anymore. It's in many places. It's where I come from in Croatia. It's in places in China. I remember a couple of years back, I was walking in Beijing, and I was desperately trying to have a beer. And I had the cash, but European credit cards would not work in China. And nobody wanted to take cash. I actually had cash. And I entered, can you give me a beer? No. Can you give me a beer? No. Because it's cashless payment. Now, it's problematic when you're mainly in China and when you have a European credit card. But it's not the point. The point is that we notice the digital, we don't notice it regularly. When do we start noticing the digital? We start noticing it when it's gone, when it doesn't work. It's pretty much the same thing with electricity. You didn't come to this room and say, oh, thank God, we have electricity. You know, we have the light. You take it for granted, right? But if it's not there, if electricity is off, then it will be, well, not merely panic, but it would be a bit unpleasant. Everybody would immediately notice that power is not there. So when it's here, nobody notices it. When it doesn't work, then we notice it. This means that first plastics and then digital technology has become completely mainstreamed. It has entered our lives in ways that we cannot separate our digital and non-digital lives anymore. Our digital and non-digital lives can become so intertwined, so imbued in each other that we actually cannot really say where exactly the digital stops and where exactly the analog begins. In my relationship with your professor, I cannot say where our digital relationship stops and when our physical relationship begins. It's all mixed up. So today we talk in the cafe, tomorrow we talk on Zoom, and the day after tomorrow we email. And it's all become one. It's impossible to separate. So this is what Nicolas Negroponte says in 1998. And soon after, we have this guy who is really, really interesting. He's American of Italian background. His name is Kim Cascone. Americans probably pronounce it Cascone, but it's actually Cascone because it's an Italian surname. And he's a musician. Now, what does the music have in common with our topic? Well, it does a lot. So Kim is somebody who has, in late 20th century, he has started doing electronic music. But his idea was pretty strange. I mean, strange for today's thinking, right? So he said, if I produce my music on a Samsung computer, then my music is somehow not just mine. It also belongs to Samsung. If I produce my music on a Mac computer, then my music is not just mine. It somehow also belongs to Steve Jobs, right? So in order to produce original music, he first built his own computers so that he can play his music on. So he produced his computers and he produced his software in his garage, in order to be able to play his original music. Now that's a really strange way of thinking, right? How many of you feel that Bill Gates is writing a paper with you together because you're using Word. But anyway, that's what Kim Kaskone thought. And so he built his own computers, and then he would play music, he would play gigs, he would go somewhere, and he would play concerts. Now, he was not very skilled. I mean, he's a musician. Although he's a good musician, he did music for, I mean, his most famous music that he did is music for Twin Peaks, if you've heard of it. Anyway, so what he did is that he was touring around with his computers. And touring around with his computer, it would happen quite often that the computer didn't work, okay? So he would come somewhere, he would set up his computer, and the computer would like play a bit of music, and then it would be some, okay? It wouldn't work. There would be some glitch. Now, even today, we had a few glitches before we connected all those computers together in order to make my computer work on your equipment. There was this microphone that I dropped on the floor, so now I'm using the other one, etc., etc. So glitches are always possible, right? It can be a human glitch, like this, or it can be a technological glitch, like something stopping working just because it stopped working. But he found something in this glitch. He said, okay, so we have digital music, digital product, and then we have error. And this error is not machine error, this error is human error. So when I have a glitch in my equipment, I actually have a penetration of analog into digital. I have a combination where my biological imperfectness breaches through digital, because everything that's digital, everything that's artificial, it's clean, it's crisp, it works, right? Now, errors are not, I mean, computers don't make errors. Computer programmers make errors. People make errors. So glitch is something, it's this breaching of borders between the artificial and the human, between the digital and the analog. He called it post-digital. This was the first time that somebody in history used the word post-digital. Not exactly, and I'll tell you why. Interestingly, around that time, there was, Kim Kaskone, who still lives in San Francisco, came to London in the same year. And in the same year, he came to London, and of course, like many cultured people, he went to Tate Modern. And in Tate Modern, he went to the bookshop, like all of us go to the bookshop if for no other reasons than to buy some presents for our kids. And what he found in the bookshop was this book. He didn't know about this book. The book was called The Post-Digital Membrane by Robert Pepperer and Michael Punt. Now these guys have written a book about visual arts, about painting, about graphics, about visual stuff. So Kaskone did music, they did visual stuff. And they thought about the post-digital for the concept of the membrane. Now, if you think about basic biology, I'm not sure how many of you remember your biology lessons from when you were kids, but in human cells have some like membranes, and these membranes let like the nutrients and the oxygen, so they can go from one side to another, but they cannot go back. So it's like a one-way road where you have a membrane, and then when you eat some sugar, then the sugar goes into the cell, but doesn't go out. Instead, some waste goes out, which later goes to blood and so on and so on and so on. So it's like a semiconductor in a way. So the post-digital membrane, and they spoke about the post-digital membrane, about the idea that the analog and the digital somehow penetrate into each other in the similar way that human cells, biological cells, are being fed in our body. And they also gave it the word post-digital. And Kaskone found it and said, oh, so what happens is that maybe he was not the first one who actually used the word post-digital. We don't know. because he was in touch with those guys. They also published the book in year 2000. His article was published in 2000. Difference is about 3 or 4 months. They had the coffee together, and they couldn't decide who was actually first. And then they decided that they will kind of share primacy and say that they will all be listed as the first ones who mentioned this word. I know this because I interviewed Cascone a few years ago, and I asked him about this story. I asked him, well, people say that you are the first. He said, yes, but there are these other guys. I knew about the book, but I didn't know about the story. It was the beginning of the internet. I mean, there was some kind of emailing in World Wide Web and so on, but it was 25 years ago, you imagine. So he really didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't know what he was doing. It was literally the concept of the post-digital was literally developed independently by them. Cascone using the metaphor of the glitch in music, and Peperler and Pant using the metaphor of the membrane, biological metaphor of the membrane in visual arts. There's also kind of symmetry here, because the glitch would kind of be digital, membrane is biological. It's really interesting. So yeah, and let's move on. So the concept of the post-digital has been developed in the next few years by many people. I decided that I would not now show you whatever, but if you take a look at famous artist exhibitions from that day, like Documenta and so on, some of the leading exhibitions in visual arts, architecture, design, you will actually find that the concept of the post-digital has been popping up in artistic circles for quite a lot of time, for 10-ish years. And then finally, there were some guys who were, by the way, art historians, so again, not really social science in the sense that we do, more like humanities, who actually started to talk about post-digital research. So there was this journal, which was quite famous then. Right now it has become quite obscure, but never mind. And in this journal, they did a special issue, this is 2014, about post-digital research. Now, I talked to most of these people, at least to those who are still alive, and people like Florian Kramer, who is an art historian, and I asked them, so what they did here is, for the first time, they kind of moved the concept of the post-digital from music and visual arts into something that would be like roughly humanities, because it was usually about art history and these kind of things. It was still not like proper social science or whatever. Anyway, so they developed these things about post-digital research. And now, all of us, we all like speaking about ourselves, so of course now I will speak about myself. Back in the day, that was 2014, accidentally this was the same year that we first met, that Professor Lee and I first met at Edinburgh at the Network Learning Conference, discussing critical research, network learning research. Keynote speaker was Neil Selwyn. He gave a very provoking talk. After that, we spent many hours discussing it amongst us and others, and so on, and so on, and so on. And it was like, it was a time of change. I mean, you could feel that this old concept, technocentric concept of of e-learning was kind of coming to an end, and something else was in the air. And I was quite frustrated working in e-learning then with the idea that, with several ideas that were quite dominant during that times. Now, there are two ideas I was especially frustrated with, and I would like to share my frustration with you. I hope that you will understand and become angry with me too. The first one is technological determinism. Technological determinism is a philosophical position which describes the belief, personal and social belief, in that kind of technology determines the rest of the society. So there is a certain kind of technological development, like now this Gen AI, right, ChatGPT and other tools. And now a technological determinist will say, well, we have generative AI, they're getting better and better, and they will transform our world in this and this way. Yeah, technologies will not transform our world. This microphone is a tool which helps me to talk not so loudly so that you can hear me in the back row and that you can also record. But this microphone doesn't determine what I will tell you. Now, similarly, of course, that artificial intelligences will change our world, but not on their own right. Technology will not do anything. People who use technologies will change the world. Policies will change the world. Ways of using those technologies will change the world, not technologies themselves. So the idea that our society is somehow led by technologies, that technologies are a vehicle, a driver of progress, is kind of misleading because it doesn't really involve this dialectic between technologies and human beings. We need to have both. As we would say in Europe, it takes two to tango, and it does take really technologies and human beings to make any kind of social development. But, okay, the other thing that I was quite angry with was technological instrumentalism. Now, instrumentalism is the opposite. Instrumentalism says that technology is just a tool and nothing else. So it says that this microphone is just a tool that helps me project my voice to the last row. Now, that's also a problem, because it's not just a tool. It's more than a tool, in a sense that because I have this technology, I don't need to shout. I can actually speak down. I can speak quietly. So the existence of the microphone does change me. It's not just an instrument. It's a bit more than an instrument. Marshall McLuhan said in the 1960s, first we create technologies and then technologies create us. Or first we change technologies and then technologies change us, depending on the translation. The idea is basically that there is a certain dialectic between technology and human beings. Something maybe a bit post-digital? Okay, but if you take a look at policy, if you take a look at practice, even today, most educational policy, most technological policy, even in the most developed places, in the technologically developed places in the world like Korea, will still be technologically determinist and technologically instrumentalist. If you take a look at your university's strategy for using AI, you will still find determinism and instrumentalism. Those things are so deeply imbued in human thinking. We philosophically know that they're wrong. Educational theory knows that they are wrong. When I was describing those things, people were nodding their heads, implying that you've already heard about those things before. But they still persist. And those ideas are so deeply ingrained in our research, technology, and also practice that it's very, very, very hard to get rid of. So I was thinking, okay, those are my main frustrations, together with some other ideas about publishing and so on. And I shared my frustration with a group of friends. And this group of friends, they said, well, yeah, we feel the same. So we wrote this article called Postdigital Science and Education. And what we did basically, we were looking for some ancestry, and we found the works of Kim Cascone, Pepper Pant, and all those other people. We found those exhibitions, for arts exhibitions, we found this music and so on. And we actually discovered that the notion of the post-digital gives us a slightly different way to think about the world around us and to think about research and to think about special education. So we wrote this article, and basically what we did with this article is that we stole, or we nicked, if you want, a concept developed in the arts and the humanities and introduced this concept into social sciences and especially educational studies. This article did that. This article basically took a concept developed in one field and pushed it into the other. Not more, not less. So we are not really inventors. We are like educated thieves. Anyway, so that's what we did. And people liked it. People thought that it would be a nice idea. And actually, in the feedback to this article, I mean, you can see it has quite a lot of downloads, views, and so on. And in the feedback to this article, people actually started saying, okay, let's try to do something more about the post-digital. So we said, okay, I mean, it's not that we didn't want to do that. We actually had an idea to do something else. And our next step was the foundation of the Postdigital Science and Education Journal, which was actually founded like maybe 8 years ago. Today, right now we are on our 7th issue. Our first issue was in 2019, but actually we started publishing some papers in 2018. And we started to develop this post-digital perspective. We used this concept developed in the arts, and we pushed it here. Now, we are not the first ones who did it. There are people who did it, like postmodernism, for instance, came from the arts. Accelerationism came from the arts. Actually, if you take a look at the history of scientific ideas, many of these ideas were actually first developed in the field of arts. Fine arts, music, visual arts, these kind of things. So again, nothing new under the sun. It's not that we invented something. We actually took the same route that scientists or researchers have been taking for many years, for many centuries, and we just actually stole another thing from the arts and pushed it into the social sciences. Okay, so that's the journal. And now, in the first few issues, what we did, we developed the concept of the post-digital. We kind of talked about the concept of the post-digital, and we tried to develop it in as many directions as possible. So if I show you some of our first issues, then for instance in issue 1, which is like the inaugural issue, you will find people writing about is network learning post-digital, critical philosophy of the post-digital, network learning and post-digital, brain data, and so on and so on. Basically, you will find people writing about some foundational questions of what the post-digital is and what the post-digital may be. Soon, of course, people moved away from those foundational issues because they're actually quite boring, and they moved towards the application and development of post-digital theory in many different fields. Now, for some reason, the post-digital lens, philosophical lens, was a fresh lens that brought a bit of a different way of looking at existing problems. And because it was a fresh lens, and because it brought this slightly different way of understanding things, it kind of gave some nice results. So people liked it, because people found out that they can actually use this perspective and make some breakthroughs that were perhaps not so easy to make using some other approaches, some other more established approaches. In innovation theory, basically we call it low-hanging fruit. It means that what happens is that, at the beginning, when you just scratch the surface, everything is kind of easy because it's quite close. But as you develop a theory, it becomes more complex, it becomes heavier, it becomes harder to work with. So we did quite a lot of this, and we did quite a lot of this research, and this research has achieved some nice results, and I will be talking about those nice results a bit later. And at some point, the thing has, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot one thing that I need to mention. At the same time, while we were developing this, people have started to, post-digital theory has started to pop up not only in our circles, but also elsewhere. This is one example, post-digital participation at the Leibniz camp. I was there actually this May for the third or fourth time. But it's interesting that they started this in 2018, in the same year that we started our journal, that we didn't know for each other. I found those people literally using Google, like Googling post-digital and looking what other people are doing. And I found those people. Of course, it turned out that the leader of this is Felicitas McGilchrist, that I used to live and study and work in Edinburgh, that she's Scottish, who got married in Germany and moved to Germany, that actually we have some common friends. I mean, the world is a small place. And that actually, and by the way, Felicitas is now one of the editors of a well-known journal in the field, which is called Learning Media and Technology, LMT, which I warmly recommend to you, besides, of course, Postdigital Science and Education. And so these people have been doing this, and I invited Felicitas to come over. She invited me to come to Leibniz, similar like this, my visit to Korea. Okay, come over, give us a talk, let's see what you're doing. And actually we found that we have quite a lot of things in common, not just the name. But, of course, those people have a slightly different understanding of the post-digital than we have. There's this as well. In Lancaster, it's called the Center for Post-Digital Cultures, which is led by Gary Hall. Now, I knew about Gary Hall's work because he has been, when you Google early post-digital work, you will find his articles from 2010, 2011. But not really. So these guys have developed a post-digital center somewhere. So now we kind of figured out that roughly at the same time when we developed the journal, that there were centers around the world being built, working in the post-digital perspective. There was this really interesting thing. I forgot to prepare it, so I'll just Google it quickly. There were things like this too. So there's somebody, there was this big project at Aston University, like training of new generation of engineers and researchers. Post-digital project closed in March 2024, and it was like on for 10 years. So suddenly you find that there are actually post-digital projects around, Europe funding, US funded, so on. There are post-digital centers, but there was no post-digital journal, there was no post-digital publishing outlet, and we were the ones who created the publishing outlet. Naturally, people coming from all these post-digital centers and stuff came to us to publish their work. This is where the story of the journal actually begins, because now we published more and more, and because we published more and more, we couldn't publish it all. So we went, so instead of just the journal, we founded the book series. Now the book series has exactly the same name, Post-Digital Science and Education, and actually it's aimed at doing things that we cannot do in the journal for any reason, mostly because of space restrictions. Simply, the journal is not big enough. I mean, we could make a huge journal, but then it would not be, I mean, you could not follow it and so on and so on. It's actually good to have different outlets. So we created another outlet, which is the book series. Can you just borrow me your books? So, and as the journal and the book series have developed further, I had more and more questions by people asking me, okay, so how do we do post-digital research? How do we approach post-digital research? What does it mean to do post-digital? Because, I mean, now we've published 200 plus papers per year. For me as editor, it means almost one new paper every working day, but it's accepted papers. Rejected papers are 10 times more. So now the question is, okay, so how do we help those people coming into the field to actually do post-digital research? And at the same time, I mean, and really, what is post-digital research? So I had those emails, people asking me, what is post-digital research for you, and how do I research Korean primary school from a post-digital perspective? Wait, so I would like spend a couple of hours writing emails, explaining, and so on, but actually I didn't know the answers myself. So I thought, okay, what shall we do? What we did is that we actually asked the people, we asked the crowd. So we went to do 2 edited books. One is called Post-Digital Research, another one is called Constructing Post-Digital Research. I just wanted to show you that they actually exist, but they are my gift to my good friend. And I'll also show them to you here. So this is the first one, and this is the second one. And what we did with those books, we had 2 different goals. One goal that we had was to develop post-digital research, because we didn't know much, so those are research books, and there are research chapters inside, because people have actually developed how they feel and what they think about post-digital research. But then it was not just about that, because we also want to have a bit of a pedagogical thing. So in those like 700 pages, you've got, if you want to do post-digital research, actually this is a good place to start. And it's an important, it's an important resource for the community. I will be back with the books a bit later, but before that, I'll just show you one more thing. That was not enough, right? Because those books are fixed. They're fixed in stone. Once you write a book, once you publish a book, it's already out of date. You cannot, I mean, this is a race that you cannot win. Whatever you write today, tomorrow is out of date. So you need a continuously improving resource. And because the post-digital science and education ecosystem has developed so much, we developed the third thing, which is called the encyclopedia. So this is the encyclopedia of post-digital science and education, where we actually, I'm the editor again, because I seem to be editor of everything, because here we actually have short encyclopedia, 200 or 300,000 words, short encyclopedia entries about many different topics. And now, it started a few years ago. Right now we have 99 entries. Isn't it lovely? We don't have 100 entries yet, but we are close. We are getting there. So we have all those entries, and it's actually open. And the publisher actually wants me to finish this, but I don't want to finish it. I actually want to keep it open. I want to keep it editing, because I want to add new things inside, and I want to update things. Once we finish the book, Springer will print it, and I will be able to show it to you like this. And it's going to be nice, because it's going to be a big book, to show. But it's going to get out of date, because as soon as you print it, you cannot change it anymore. So for as long as it's not finished, it's actually up to date. And this is why the encyclopedia is something that I would like to keep alive for as long as I will be able to. I don't want to shut it down. I will probably find a co-editor, somebody to do it with me, but I don't want to shut it down. Because if I shut it down, then, I mean, if I close it, if I print it, I will get a nice thing in my CV, but I don't really need it. And apart from that, I will not get anything else, because once I shut it down, it's down. Of course, all those things are connected. So you can read about Kim Kaskone that I was mentioning, and so on. You can, yeah, okay. I would need to log in and so on and so on. But that's the idea. So now this is the post-digital science and education idea. And the idea is that we were frustrated with the state of being. And we wanted to, academically, we wanted to do something differently. It's a group of us. It's not just me. It's never just about me. It's always about other people. And we did it together as a collective. And Professor Lee is a part of this collective. There are many people who are part of this collective. Somebody does something more. Somebody does something less. Somebody does a bit more, then disappears, and then comes back after 5 years. I mean, that's the nature of the collective. That's the nature of the community. And the community is growing. The community is quite big. But the idea is actually that there's much more than just what we are involved in. So what we do is publishing. We do the journal, the book series, the encyclopedia. We provide complete publishing ecosystem. Whatever your publishing needs in post-digital area, you can do it here. But actually, if you Google or use another search engine at Google post-digital, you will find that we publish less than half of everything what is post-digital. Because our book series is with Springer, but you will have many post-digital books with Routledge. We will have post-digital books with this. We will have post-digital books with that, especially books. You will have post-digital articles in LMT, Learning Media Technology. You will have them in teaching and higher education. You will have them in other outlets. All those people, we kind of know each other because we all visit similar conferences, publish in similar places. I myself don't publish just in my journal. I publish everywhere else. And so it's part of the ecosystem. There are research centers. There are projects funded at all levels, European, American, Chinese. There's all kind of stuff going on around the post-digital, and we have a role in this overall ecosystem. I would not like to underestimate our role, but I would also not like to overestimate our role. I mean, the fact is that, as I said, we publish between 40 and 50% of everything post-digital currently in the world. But that means that somebody else is publishing 15 to 60 as well percent. I mean, so we are just the biggest single source, nothing else. So the post-digital is a movement that a group of us has we kind of co-created those outlets, but we did not create the movement. There were people before us. There are people who exist in parallel with us, and there are surely people who will come after us. I think it's hugely important to situate this into the perspective, because I don't like when people say, you are the guys who invented this, you are the fun. Kind of, yeah, we did put things into one place, but the ideas were here. We did develop them, but they're not just ours. And it's the nature of scholarship, it's the nature of knowledge. If you look at fields like science and technology studies, for instance, then you will STS, then you will learn that actually all knowledge is socially constructed. There's no me without you, and there's no you without me. The Africans call it Ubuntu. The idea that actually we together create the post-digital system. Okay. So that's roughly my overview of ideas and histories of post-digital science education that I'm currently aware of. I could give you more information. I could tell you that currently there are some centers in the making. I can tell you that there are labs in the making. I can tell you there's this, there's that. I know a lot about the post-digital because my position is prominent. My name is out there. So actually I get all the information. But actually there's so much going on in various places around the world. And that's amazing. I mean, that's really something which those things have been translated. Like, for instance, our original post-digital science and education article has been translated into many, many languages. from 5 languages or 6 languages in Europe, through Chinese, Spanish, I mean, you name it. It's been out in so many languages, and there are reflections in so many languages as well. Now, but today's talk, by the topic of today's talk, because we are at the boot camp, right? So because we are at the boot camp, I would like to speak more closely about post-digital research. So for the next 15 or 20 minutes, before we move to questions and answers, I will focus on, this was like the historical/theoretical introduction, and now we will move closely to post-digital research. But before we move there, just a bit of questions and answers, just a bit to hear your thoughts, opinions, and ideas about these histories and these concepts of the post-digital. Any thoughts?
First, thank you for sharing your great journey of Postdigital Science and Education journal. And I was quite curious, is it really possible to have something specific or particularly practical methodology to make it happen post-digital? I mean, I think post-digital is kind of theoretical lens, not a practical methodology, but do you think it would be possible to make it as a kind of one methodology? Do you think is it possible?
Thank you so much for your question. Sunny, we did have this discussion a bit earlier today, right? There are two things. First, we had this, we published 2 books on post-digital research. The first one is about theory, the second one is about practice. So the first one speaks theoretically what I've been talking today. And the second one shows. So here's my example of doing post-digital research here. Here's my example of doing post-digital research there. When you take a look at downloads, the practical one has twice as more downloads than the theoretical one. Practice is what people are interested in. And you're right, there are many ways of doing practically post-digital research. Now the question is there a unified way? Is there one way of doing post-digital research? The answer is no. I will speak about why there's no one way, and it's the basic feature of post-digital research is that you cannot pin it down and say post-digital research is this. Post-digital research can be many things, and I will try to explain this. It's not because I don't want to answer your question. It's because of this philosophical position which translates very much into practice. Refusing, okay, let me just briefly, if I define this is a human being, then at the same time I include. So this being belongs to the class of human beings, and we have like 50 human beings in the classroom. But this definition also excludes. It means this is not a cat. This is not a dog. This is not an elephant. This is a human being. Okay? And it's fine. It works. Because it works in a sense that you are really not an elephant, right? Okay. But let's take a bit more complicated example. If I say I'm a man, it means that I'm not a woman. Now, there are 50 shades of gray there, right? There are people who identify like male, there are people who identify like female, there are trans people in various phases of transition. Are there really just 2 genders and nothing in between? It's already hard to say. It's not like you and the elephant. It's clear that you are not an elephant, and it's clear that an elephant is not a human being. Or, when you take a look at some other examples, like what means. So every time you define something, you say it is, you also include, but you exclude. You say what something is, and you say what something is not. Now that's a problem, because we don't want to exclude. And because we don't want to exclude, because we don't want to define. Because when we don't define, when we refuse to define, when we refuse to put people into classes, or when we refuse to put living beings into classes, then we can jump between the classes. Then we can speak about post-digital elephants, and it's okay, right? Yep, I'll come back to this because it's a really important question, but for now, I think it's enough.
Just add something. Is it all right? So I know some of you are not necessarily interested in post-digital theory or practice and research. I know that we are coming from different departments. So this talk that has been given, and then the latter part of this conversation is going to be about post-digital, but I want you to take the point that how the scholarship has emerged, and then entire conversation about the finding right people to work with, too. So it's not only about writing English article. So before writing English article, the first thing that we have decided is what we want to say about the phenomenon that we are interested in, and finding right journals and finding right the community that you want to voice, you want to make sure your voice got heard. By whom? I think that's entire conversation. So why we wanted to start from this kind of conversation about post-digital is not like we want, I mean, I love post-digital theory, but it's not to really impose this onto you. But like entire narrative is something that we don't really listen. I mean, we don't have access to the behind story like this usually, because we only see SSCI index journal as definer form that we have to go and reach somehow. But actually it's, what Peter is saying is that it's like all collective effort that he actually created with the people like-minded with him to make the venue for him being able to speak up. So I think that's really good about this story. So just, I wanted to make sure that you're just not going to be like, oh, this is not necessarily my area. I'm interested. And also tomorrow we'll come back to it, but entire boot camp is like huge assemblage. So we have people, we have technology. So what we're going to do tomorrow in terms of writing together is all the part of post-digital research practice. So this situation can be theorized with a theory, but if you're not interested in it, it's okay. But the focus can be on the meta level of narrative about developing scholarship and finding right people for you to talk with. Is it okay? Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your inspirational leadership. I'd like to define it that way. If post-digital is a concept or a theory, then I assume then there are some anti-theory to post-digitalness. And I think from your speech, I can list something like technological determinism or instrumentalism. And I would like to also add then neoliberalism and some other things. And could you tell us some other versions of anti-theories so that we can understand post-digital better? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, those are really such clever and important questions. Thank you. First, just to reflect on what your professor said, of course, I wanted to give you a theoretical background because I think it's hugely important to have this theoretical background before we move on. But tomorrow, as I announced at the beginning, we will do things very precisely in terms of choosing the journal, choosing the theory, and so on. And actually and indexing and those things that I know that you are quite interested in. But my answer, the second part of my answer is really the answer to you. It's, I mean, we probably can agree that there is one reality. So in this room, we have one situation which takes place right now. I'm standing here in front of you with my mic. You are listening, you are asking questions. Now, this situation, which is really just one reality, can be approached by different people in different ways. Depending, for instance, depending on your position, post-digital positionality, as we call it, my position as a speaker is not the same as your position as a student. It's not the same as your position as a listener. Professor's position as a host is not the same as my position as the guest. Now, each of those positions brings in a different, and especially, I'm from Croatia, you are from Korea, but you, as far as I understood, are from different parts of Korea and from different districts and whatever. But you still probably share more between yourselves than I share with you. So maybe my impression of something that happens in this room is different than yours because of cultural background. Now, but we have one reality, and we can approach this one reality from many different perspectives. There's this quite famous now network learning perspective, and your professor and I met at a network learning conference, and that's a perspective that understands learning, human learning, through the lens, through the metaphor of networks. So for instance, I can take a look at this room and I can understand all of us as a combination of nodes and connections between nodes. That would be a network learning approach. But I can also come here and I can say, okay, let's take a look from another perspective, which would be a post-digital perspective, which would speak about sort of bio-digital assemblages, meaning that me as a human being, and you as a human being, and you as a human being, are somehow connected through technology. That's why I say bio-digital. Biological, my body, digital, this device. Combination of bio-digital, which works in this room. I'll just take those two examples. So those are two different lenses. One lens is network learning, the other lens would be post-digital. Now, can we connect those lenses? Well, we can. We can still say that those bio-digital assemblages, we can still call them nodes and connections, and we can still apply the metaphor on the network on top of bio-digital assemblages, so that it's kind of compatible. That would be the part of when you ask about the post-digital, how to distinguish it from other perspectives. And I would say, well, we speak about those things, but then there are other perspectives that speak about other things. Now, network learning is easy because it kind of fits nicely with post-digital, so it kind of can be combined together. But let's take a look at some other positions. Let's take a look at numerical stuff, analytic philosophy, for instance. Okay? So if you take a look at philosophies, you will have analytic philosophies, and then you will have broadly constructivist philosophies like STS and so on. Now, in this continuum, there's no question. Post-digital is constructivist. It's not analytic. So if we talk about philosophical perspectives, the idea that we refuse to define what it means, the word post-digital, what post-digital research is, directly cuts off all the analytic philosophy and leaves you in social constructivism. Now, that's why I was emphasizing the community, because I'm not talking about psychology, I'm not talking about me constructing my own reality and you constructing your own reality. I'm talking about the post-digital community co-constructing reality as a society. So, in that sense, for instance, on the continuum between analytic and social constructivism, analytic philosophy and social constructivist philosophy, post-digital theory would be social constructivist. We can move on. At the position, if we take a look at ethics, and you mentioned, I'm really happy that you mentioned neoliberalism, I would mention capitalism as well. We have those very opposed systems. On the one hand, we have something like neoliberalism. On the other hand, we have some sort of communism, socialism, whatever you want to call it. In different places, it has different meanings. I come from a country which used to be a socialist country because Croatia before it became independent in the 1990s. It was actually part of Yugoslavia. The full name was Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia. It was socialist, the first name. Now my country is capitalist. Interestingly, when you go to China and when you mention the word socialism, it has a completely different meaning than it has in my country. That's why I'm wary of using exact names. That, of course, that socialism and communism are not the same thing, but those things can be in China, in Cuba, in Korea, and in Croatia, and in America, the same word will have different meanings. I mean, beware of that. So, but here, definitely post-digital theory has big roots in the tradition of critical pedagogy, the Frankfurt School, those neo-Marxisms, and so on, because post-digital theory is something that insists on social justice, it insists on personal emancipation, it insists on personal freedom, it insists on freedom of speech, freedom of that, freedom of that. So, and then you can move it on towards, very much towards the other things, because it very soon becomes very political. So it will very soon give you opinions of things like wars in Ukraine, Palestine, and so on. It's a slippery slope, though. But interestingly, again, the post-digital is quite big, even in some authoritarian regimes, such as China, where actually they managed to cherry-pick what they like and ignore the parts that they don't like. Again, the idea is that there's no one thing that is post-digital. Your post-digital is not necessarily the same as my post-digital. We do share some basic assumptions, but we can also, so even when you take a look at those founding, the six of us who wrote the original article, when we sit at the same table, we will not agree about many things post-digital. But it happens not just in the post-digital world, it happens in network learning, it happens in other, let's say, intellectual movements or paradigms as well. It's quite a common thing. So yeah, there are some things, like definitely critical pedagogy, definitely on the left, not on the right. Definitely social constructivism rather than analytic. Definitely this rather than that. But again, there will be so many different interpretations of this that I'm not completely sure whether we would agree. Again, I cannot give you a completely straightforward answer, okay? That's the nature of the post-digital. That's why we often write that it's elusive. It's something that's it's always one step in front of you. You just think that you caught it, that you understood something, and then it moves one step, and then you understand even less than yesterday. That's what happens to me all the time. So, yes, those are some obvious examples, but again, depending on interpretation, because you will find prominent members of Communist Party of China who will actually, say, post-digital, of course, without subscribing to certain aspects that they don't like, of course. So that would be the sort of stuff. Yeah, but I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to move on to post-digital research. Otherwise, 2 hours will not be enough, and 2 hours should be enough for everything. Please, let me just give you the mic.
Thank you for your time and showing your journey of post-digital. And I have one question related to your older major physics. Okay. I think it could be some personal question, but related to before a former answer, I guess you can have some specific view or interest in post-digital with or related to your older major physics. Do you have any idea or something you can introduce?
I'm not sure if I understood completely your question. I'll try to answer the best I can. If I don't answer, then take the mic, please, and explain further. Personally, I have a lot of beliefs, like all of us. I personally believe, and it has nothing to do with post-digital theory, it has only to do with my own personal belief as Peter. I believe that knowledge is constructed. I'm really curious, that's why I wanted to study physics. I'm really interested in nature and in human relationships within this nature. But I am aware that I cannot do it on my own. I'm aware that the time of big philosopher who is sitting somewhere in the tower and writing big books has gone. We live in the age, and you are all, I think, or most of you would be younger than me. We live in the age where everything gets co-constructed. Things, somebody starts a TikTok trend, somebody starts this, somebody starts that, and then other people pick up. So, as a society, nobody of us would live without others. I mean, it's a simple fact. When you are born, you are a small baby. You are helpless. Without other people, you die. When you are old, again, you are helpless. Without other people, you die. There's these few more years in the between that you can actually do something. And what do? You take care about the kids and about the elderly. I mean, I'm kidding. But the thing is that nobody of us is alone. And I really believe in social development of knowledge. So for me, it's not about me in the post-digital perspective. It's not about my role. It's about, or if there is my role, then it will be enabling the community to do its best. A typical example would be those two books on post-digital research, which are not here because I was particularly interested in post-digital research. They are here because I wanted to enable others to do post-digital research. Because I think that the only way to develop knowledge is to hear from you, to hear from you, to hear from you. And it doesn't matter that professor is a professor with so many beautiful publications, and that you are a student with little or none publications, because you may have something fresh that she doesn't or that I don't. Of course, there's a scrutiny, so you cannot come with just anything, but that's the way how things are developed. So I believe in community. I believe in the power of the community, and I believe that my role, kind of here, is not so much to develop knowledge, but to develop possibilities or foundations, or to enable others to create knowledge together. This is why books on post-digital research, I didn't write them. I edited them. And there are 70 or 80 authors inside, because I wanted different voices to be heard. This is also why, in post-digital science and education, whenever there's something, an edited book or a special issue, never in history we had a closed call. You know those calls for papers when people just invite friends and then they write the book together? Not on my watch. Since I'm the editor, and for as long as I'm the editor, all calls will always be open and public, so that everybody can apply. You can apply, you can apply, you can apply, you can apply. You may not pass the review process, that's a different thing. But everybody has an equal opportunity to participate. And I think it's hugely important. There was one more question.
Yeah, can I just elaborate the question further? I think that's an important question that you have only touched upon in terms of your answer. So, obviously that when we think about social sciences and just like pure sciences like physics, I think we think that kind of knowledge is understood very differently. So you coming from kind of pure sciences as your background and trained to be physicists, and seeing some value in this artistic area of post-digital. So I think question is more of that he could see some, probably he's wondering that there's some connection between your former degree, how you have been trained in physics as a physicist, and then how it's really connected to social sciences. Now you have this social constructive perspective of the knowledge, which I guess it's very different from how scientist is approaching the world. So I think probably, or not, I mean, you can just defend yourself, but yeah, I think if you can make a little bit of the connection that as a person who has shifted this entire discipline from science to social sciences, what are the influences of that previous experience you had into or upon the choices of you're making right now with the new area of scholarship?
Well, thanks for the clarification. I think it's. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think that we are all just people looking at the world around us and trying to understand the world. I don't think that there is a fundamental difference between the natural sciences and the social sciences and the humanities. I know that many people will disagree, but I'll give you a few examples. COVID-19. You had all the scientists, all the medical doctors and so on who were fighting against COVID. And then you have people who say that COVID doesn't exist. You have anti-vaxxers. Did you have them in Korea? So you will find a medical doctor with all the degrees from Harvard, Princeton, whatever, saying that vaccines don't work. And you will have another doctor saying that vaccines work. In physics, more precisely climate science, which is part of physics, you will have people who will obviously show the anthropogenic climate change, so basically that we heat up the planet and that we are causing trouble. But then you will have physicists who will say that no, that our planet has always gone through phases of warming and cooling, and that this is just one more phase and it has nothing to do with human. So the sciences, natural sciences, like physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, tend to have this aura of, like the humanities, the social sciences, it can be like this or like that, but there's only one truth in physics. It's not true. It's not true. I mean, they disagree about basic things. I mean, but crucial questions of today, like the disease and the climate change. I mean, what's more important today than climate change? Let's face it. I mean, it's especially in places which are quite vulnerable to climate change, such as whole Asia, which has a huge population, and we know about flooding and all those things, that it will disproportionately affect some places in Asia, not all of them, but some of them. We have cities that are being defended because they would flood. I mean, we already have things like that. So it's hugely important. Now, the thing is that there is some myth that natural sciences are kind of better or more accurate or more solid somehow than the humanities and the social sciences and the arts. But I don't believe it's true. And this is exactly what science and technology studies and scholars like Steve Fuller will tell you, that actually there's no fundamental difference between physics, education studies, psychology, climate studies, or visual arts, or music. Because all those things, they will have different approaches to the world, but basically there's no way of human thinking which is foolproof. It's people attempting to describe and explain to themselves the world around themselves in many, many different ways. Now, why, and that coming back to your question again, some ways could be better than others, but only maybe for some questions. It really depends on the nature of question. If you want to tackle a problem of climate change, you can tackle it from a biological perspective, from a physical perspective, from a chemical perspective, from an artistic perspective, and every perspective will give you a different thing. Now, what I would argue, that those perspectives they cannot translate so easily. They are, quantum physicists would say, incommensurable. But taken together, they will give us more information than each of the perspectives themselves. So I'm not saying that post-digital research is better than other forms of research. What I will say that post-digital research is better for some things, and perhaps network learning research is better for some things, and perhaps some other way of researching is better for some things. The skill that I'm hoping to talk about tomorrow, just a wee bit, that you need to pick, is when you are facing a particular problem, especially after you graduate and you end up in some work, and then you get a problem, you work for the Seoul water supplies, and you get a task to explore something about the water, so you have a defined research question. Your skill will be to find the best research method for this particular, how to attack this particular question. It can be post-digital, but it can be something else. I'm here to promote the post-digital a bit, but more importantly, I'm here to actually try to show you that all those approaches can be good or bad depending on the context, and to talk a bit about ways in which you can perhaps pick the best way to attack the problem which is in front of you, and then about publishing and so on. But there is a lady here who had a question, and no, please, you raise your hand, and now you need to ask. But this is really the last one, because we don't need to move on.
So this is my first time hearing about this theory, so I might have comprehended it wrong. But I wanted to know if post-digital theory is as opposed to a pre-digital theory, or is it dynamic in a way that there could be a post-digital, in the sense that we're not just reliant on technology, but we depend completely on it, and finally there's a stage where we cannot survive without technology. So this was my question.
Thank you so much. This question has been asked quite often, especially at the beginning, or the first part of the question, especially at the beginning of post-digital theory. But I will start with the second one. We always depend on technology. Human beings are defined as technological beings. You depend now on the technology of clothing, because if you were naked, it's okay now, temperature is okay. But if you were naked, and if it was -5 outside, if it was winter, you would die. You depend on technology of whatever. You don't need to go to the hospital to give birth. For centuries, women would give birth because some elder women, like grandmas and so on, would actually help them give birth. That's technology, that's knowledge accumulated for generations. Without this technology, child mortality would be much higher. Of course, today it's even better because you just go to the hospital and there's a very little chance of you dying or the child dying and so on. But only 100 years ago, at least where I come from, my grandma was born at home. And who gave birth? Some women from the neighborhood who had the technology to do it. So it's probably the same in Korea. Maybe it depends on just how many generations back you look. Maybe in some places it maybe still goes on. In some places it was maybe 100 years ago. But I don't think that people gave birth even rich people gave birth in hospitals in 18th century. So it's all quite a new development. For centuries people have have depended on different types of technologies. Childbirth, clothing, heating, shoes. So our dependence on technologies is not new. What is new is the form of technology. Now we have digital technology, which is different. And what is new is our understanding. And then brings me to the second question. I don't like the word post-digital. I never liked it. I think that it has a limited lifespan. I think that the word post-digital will probably once disappear. And I would actually like it to disappear. I don't think that anything post can last forever, because if it's a post, then it's a pre, then there's a post-post, and so on. But that's the word that people used before us. We found the philosophy. Somebody gave it the name. I didn't give it the name. Kim Cascone and Pepperell and Pant gave it the name. The name has remained. At some point, the community will decide to change the name. But the principle will hopefully remain, and that's the idea. So I completely agree that the name is problematic, but we inherited it from somewhere else, so don't blame us. But anyway, I would really like to move on, and I will open Q&A a bit more again, after I talk about post-digital research, but I will just briefly now discuss the main feature of post-digital research. I mean, we kind of already touched upon those main features in this Q&A, and I'm really happy that I broke the session with the Q&A. Basically, what I will just do now, I will just quickly go through the main sections of the two books, and I will not do it because I'm lazy, but I will do it because I think that those sections really reflect some of the key issues in post-digital research, at least as we see it today. So the first question is this one, a simple question: what is post-digital? Now, we spent a lot of time today, an hour and a half, on this question. Basically, genealogies, so there is some history, there is some background. Challenges, things that we are facing now, and of course, future perspectives. How do we develop post-digital theory in the future? In terms of genealogies, I was pretty clear. Started in year 2000 with those people. Some ideas came a few years before that, and so on. Challenges, I think that the main challenges of post-digital theory are basically challenges we are facing today. That would be climate change, that would be things like Gen AI, knowledge development, and so on, and so on, and so on. Future perspectives, well, I think it does have a future. Histories, I talked about it. Post-digital parity. Post-digital parity means that we are talking here about things like this parity, this relationship between the digital and the analog. And Shane Ralston called it parity. Now, why parity? Because digital and analog, it's not a straightforward relationship, right? It's not a relationship where they're exactly equal. But it's also not a relationship where somebody dominates. It's like yin and yang. It's like male and female principle, if you want. It's not about the power. It's about the power, but it's about everything else. It's about being different and equal at the same time. So when we speak about the digital and the analog, when we speak about the biological and informational, when we speak about the cold, of course, old Greeks had names for everything. So Aristotle called it techne. Techne means technology. It's cold. It was back then. He described it as something solid, a stone. And then you have bios, but bios in Greek, which then develops into biology, and which is wet, which is moist. The idea is, and you even have this, for instance, in biology, they will have dry labs and wet labs. So you even have this parity here. So there's about cold techne and wet or warm bios. This is like the combination. And you cannot really compare. You cannot say who is stronger, stone or water. You cannot say who is, so this post-digital parity is a complex philosophical phenomenon. But let's move on. Like post-digital research, here we basically map. So we say, okay, so there's bioinformation, a hugely important thing. There are things like historical materialism. This is what you asked when you asked about the indirectly, you basically asked about ideology. And that's the ideology. Well, of course, it's a post-digital philosophical method. There is a materialism going on. I mean, we cannot say, Korea is a country which is amazingly creative. You have some of the world's leading companies in IT. You have some of the world leading patents. You have some of the world leading stuff. But sorry, you are 20, 30, 40 times smaller than China in terms of population. And there is this materialist part which says who is bigger dominates. Of course, it doesn't mean that it dominates everywhere. There is a question of you can be creative, you can be small and agile. You can move quickly. Something that is big is slow. So you can be more creative. But when it comes to resources, I mean, China is buying mines in Africa. I'm not sure about Korea. I know that my country, Croatia, is not buying anything. We are just buying products, which are designed in wherever and usually produced in China. That's the thing. Like that's so. We need to speak about materialism. We need to speak about the history, especially your history around here in this part of the world. But we can also speak about European history that we had today, and about many other histories. You know, when you see the U.S. President Trump going to Ukraine and offering to stop the war in exchange for minerals. Guys, come on. This is historical materialism. You're in the position of power. Why? Because of history and because you have the biggest army in the world. So what do? You take materials. I mean, it's very, I'm now speaking in a very plain, simple language, even simplifying too much. But that's also part of the post-digital. So that's really important. Then the other ones, and this is what I would really like to put my attention to, is those things, sensibilities and vulnerability. Now, I don't think that I need to say that here, because I know that I mean, I can see, I can feel, and I know from literature that I'm in the place which cherishes and appreciates others, the elderly, teachers, and so on. But the thing is that because we are aware of the fact that whatever we do, and that's why I started my talk with somebody else, because whatever we do, we never start from scratch. We never start from zero. We always build, as Isaac Newton said, on the shoulders of our predecessors. So Professor Lee publishes an article. I find something interesting. I pick something up and say, okay, so I'll pick this up, develop a bit further. Then I write it. Then she says, no, I like this, but not everything, so she disagrees. So she writes back and she says, look, I think that this part is fine, but I think that this part you got wrong, or that this part should be developed further. And we build on each other's shoulders. We've done it already a few times, literally, the two of us. But we all do it as a society, as scholars, as researchers. You are never alone. You always build on the shoulders of people who died, of people who are older than you, and you always prepare shoulders from somebody who will stand on your shoulders. And this implies respect towards the ones before us, and careful building of those shoulders for those after us, meaning accessible writing, etc., etc. We will talk about this much more precisely tomorrow when we will talk about academic writing. But what it doesn't often say is about this vulnerability. Now, what does vulnerability means? It means that we need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We need to allow ourselves to be wrong. We need to allow ourselves to be ashamed. So, when I come into a place like this, not into a place like this, for me, so into a place that is not my everyday place, that is new for me, that I don't know what to expect from, there's always a chance that that somebody will say, look at this guy, I mean, what the hell are you talking about? This is just not relevant for us. We live in a different universe. We wanted to hear something and you gave us something that you didn't want. That's boring, that's not interesting for us. There's always a chance for that. I can always make a mistake. I'm vulnerable. I am literally vulnerable in front of us, in front of you. Now, being vulnerable, you can be afraid of being vulnerable, or you can accept the position of being vulnerable. If you accept the position of being vulnerable, then it actually gives you the power to make mistakes. And the power to make mistakes is hugely important, because only by making mistakes is the way that we can move knowledge of the humanity forward. If you're always right, then there's something wrong with you. You must be wrong. You must be open to the possibility to be wrong. And you must be open that somebody 25 years than you will come and say, he's an idiot. You must be open to this. Of course, you are polite people, you will not say it out loud, but at least there are 5 or 10 people in this room who think exactly that. And it's fine. Thank you so much. So, another thing that comes here into question, and I'll just throw in one reference, it's Donna Haraway, epistemic humility. So when I'm vulnerable, I also need to be humble. Humble in a sense that I accept that I may be wrong. Humble in a sense that I don't say I'm bigger than you, I'm better than you because I founded something and you founded nothing. Of course you founded nothing, you're students. Nobody expects you to do that. Maybe tomorrow some of you will have a Nobel Prize and I will be left with a crashed journal that nobody wants to publish in anymore. God knows. I mean, this wheel of fortune spins and spins and spins all the time. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So being humble, it doesn't mean being servient. It doesn't mean coming here and trying to become what I'm not. I know what I've done. I know which knowledge I have. I know which knowledge you have, or lack of, and I know what I need to teach you. By the way, what I'm telling about now, is Paulo Freire. This is the Freirean method of teaching. When you say, I'm equally worth like the smallest of my students, it doesn't mean that I don't have something to teach you. I do have something to teach you. I'm embracing this position. I'm not escaping from responsibility. But I also don't put myself above you or above anybody else indeed. So the question of famous scientists or founders of whatever is, superstar scientists, I'm sure you've heard of those people. So those superstars, are not real superstars unless they're humble. When they become humble, they become even bigger than they are. It's a very big thing. Allow yourself to be vulnerable and be humble. But not helpless, not somebody who is without agency, not somebody, you know what you're doing, you know what you're researching. Being humble doesn't mean being stupid. That's a very different thing. And we come to agency, to the question of human agency, to the question of, which agency is? So what I can do, okay? What is it I can do? Okay, so I can found a journal. You can write a good paper. Your professor can deliver the best lecture she can. She can invite somebody she feels that would be right for you at a certain level of development. And so on and so on. We can all do our best, but, it's very often that when we speak about neoliberalism, for instance, then we say there's no agency. I need publications because I'm a PhD student. I need an SSCI publication. If I don't have this much publications, I will not have enough points. If I don't have enough points, I will not get the job. This kind of thing. This takes away your agency. It means that your agency has been taken by somebody or something else. But there is room for this. I will show you tomorrow a bit with citation place and so on in the journal. I will show you directly ways in which you can reclaim your agency. It doesn't mean go out. In my country, we are full with those heroic stories of people who, he took his course, he rode into the sunset, and he created a revolution. I'm not speaking about that. It's useful, but it's not what I'm talking about. There's no revolutions today. Our world has become too small thanks to digital technologies. But what we can do, we can reclaim a lot more agency than we think. We can do things, and we need to do it in a clever way. And of course, two more things, more than human. There's a whole area of post-humanism speaking about, authors like, again, Donna Haraway, Cutchell Hales, these kind of people, speaking about those various assemblages between humans and non-humans. Some of them focus on non-human animals, some of them focus on technologies and so on. But the crucial thing is that the post-digital perspective allows us to enact our agency through a sort of those post-human assemblages, which is hugely important. And finally, collective writing or collective research or collective stuff. Actually, I think that I already addressed this, and that's the idea that actually speaks about the things that we need to do together. Okay, let's go to practical parts. 5 more minutes, and then I'll open for Q&A. Agency, positionality. I talked about it. This is why I want to be talking about. So my positionality here is different than your professor's positionality, is different than your positionality as a student. Now, positionality is something that can restrict us. It always restricts us. But accepting our positionality, realizing our positionality, also liberates us in a way because it helps us to understand the world around us better, and also it helps us to actually be able to understand relationships in the world. Now, we spoke about social constructivism, again, constructing design knowledge, cyber-social research, social materiality, all those things. We discussed about those things that are kind of a feature of post-digital research, the idea that things are co-constructed, whether it's social materialism, whether it's cyber-social, whether it's this, whether that. There's many different combinations of those things, but basically it's always like co-constructing and it's always doing things together. Of course, data and algorithms. Now, I think that's something that we will talk about tomorrow because it's a whole different topic. And then finally, exclusions and inclusions. This is what I was talking about, why we don't want to define. We don't want to define because we don't want to define, because if you exclude and include, what does it mean if you include something, you automatically exclude something else? It's a topic that we'll talk about tomorrow as well. And finally, method emancipation. We finish with method emancipation. There's a bit of feminism, and then there's more. And why do we do that? Because that's crucial. When we speak about it, we need to speak about inequality. You are at the most elite, or one of the most elite universities in Korea. Whether you like my talk or not, you have an opportunity to hear somebody from a different side of the planet. Why? Because your professor has invited this person, and because your university has paid for that. I mean, it's both things. So I'm not saying, and that's again about this humility part. Your position, of course, is privileged. The question is how to understand our own privilege. And of course, the question is, especially in education scientists, is how to try and emancipate as many people we get in touch with as possible. And I think that those are nice concluding words. But before we end, we have literally 5 minutes for 1 or 2 questions for you about post-digital research. I will just please very quickly, because then I will say a few more words and I will finish at 6 p.m. exactly. So, a question or two?
I always want to say that this mic is going to make me a great singer. It should be a nice karaoke machine with this all this echo. Yes, I'd like to build on your last part of what you had just talked about. So that we are extremely privileged to be able to invite you from international speaker from the different side of the world. And also connecting with what you have written here, that the old ways of publishing has changed into more cold PDFs and online meetings and post-digital dialogues which try to breathe in a bit of soul into our techno-mediated communications. I will always want to ask a professor or scholar who travels around the world and giving talks in different countries, what do you look forward to find or communicate or discover whatsoever in the different part of the planet? So in this post-digital world where the usual communication has already been much more digitalized and everything, but we still, scholars are keen to travel all around the world giving talks and attend conferences and invite each other to places, especially institution to institutions. And for me, as a person who also went to other overseas academic conferences to give a poster presentation or do some kind of a networking activity, I was always unsure whether I'm actually doing something good for the society or am I just emitting excessive carbon dioxide into this planet, which is already failing. So what is the meaning of traveling abroad and giving talks and having this international dialogue, and what were your intentions on joining this specific workshop and giving us a talk about your post-digital research? It might be a little bit of a meta question, but I thought this would be a necessary time before we move on to the practical side of the event tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the question. I think that it's not a question with an easy answer, though. I will go back to the post-digital, to the basics of the post-digital in terms of mixing the digital with the analog. And then I will add some personal remarks. Yes, we can communicate in a digital way, we can communicate in an analog way. Now, those two forms of communication are radically different. I'm standing here in front of you, slightly jet-lagged, because right now it's quite early in the day where I came from just yesterday. I'm sweating. Some of you are sweating as well, because I can see your shiny noses and foreheads. We are in the same room together, and there's no way that a couple of hours on Zoom or in Teams would be able to give me this feeling for you. This feeling for you, I can get only here. And Sunny and Professor and other people, we spent some time in a cafe, we were chatting about our families, about our countries, and so on. These kind of things, this kind of feeling, I personally, and I think it kind of applies to many people, just cannot get in some type of online video conferencing communication, whatever. It's simply the quality of conviviality, the quality of being together with different people, what personally drives me. I'm driven by the fact that we are very different and we are so very similar at the same time, by the fact that we can admire the things that we are similar about, we can learn from things that we are different about, and we can be together. We can do things together. If we will do things in separation, then we will be weaker epistemically, because we will simply be able to learn less. But we will also end up in trouble with things like separate developments can bring about many troubles. Let's not go there. So the idea is that being together in the same room, sweating together, working together, looking at your faces, looking at people who need to go, looking at people who need to do this or that, seeing, feeling you is actually hugely important for me. This feeling, not the rational knowledge. I'm not here for rational knowledge. I rationally can learn everything about Korea from Wikipedia and other sources online. But the feeling of Korea, the feeling of you guys here, I cannot get anywhere else but here. The same thing hopefully goes both ways, so you can get a feeling of me and of my work here in a way that you would not be able to do online. This is my personal answer, but it also translates into a more general principle. I don't believe that scholarship, I don't believe that research, I don't believe that science is just about knowledge. I think that scholarship is equal, and now I know that there will be resistance to this, but I feel that scholarship is equally about knowing and about feeling. I think that it's equally about, myth. It's equally about religion. It's equally about many of those things. I mean, I was born, I'm an atheist, I'm a deep atheist, but I was born in a Catholic environment. This environment has shaped me. It has shaped me in ways that I don't even understand. It has shaped me in ways that I don't even know, but it has shaped me. Now, you were perhaps shaped by something else. You were perhaps shaped by something else. Let's see what we can do together from all these shapings. So I think that for me, really, I'm really being of not just knowledge, but also emotion. And I can feed my knowledge in a library, but I can feed my emotion only with other people. But it doesn't mean that knowledge is one thing and that emotion is another thing. For me, it's kind of together. And I think that this is also a part of post-digital research that I've tried to build into the theory. Thanks a lot. I think it's a lovely way to end the talk since it's 6 o'clock.
Thank you so much for your wonderful talk.